Welcome, traveler, to Anatomy Park, the only theme park in the world, where the roller coasters dive through neurons. The ticket booths are lined with glial cells, and the grandest attraction of all is the one you carry in your skull right now, the brain. Before we even step through the gates of this mind-blowing park, I want you to pause and think of something. You are about to explore an organ that weighs about 3 pounds, yet it generates every idea you've ever had, every dream you've ever dreamed, and every fear, joy and memory that makes you you. 3 pounds of tissue, yet it contains more connections than stars in the Milky Way. Hold on to that thought as we push open the gates and step inside. The entryway to the Brain Park isn't like the uterus ride or the heart coaster you might have seen in other corners of Anatomy Park. No, this one feels more like walking into a city that never sleeps. The gates shimmer like the folds of the cerebral cortex, each groove catching light like valleys in a neon-lit landscape. Above you rises the first sight, 2 massive hemispheres, arching like mirrored glass domes, each reflecting the other, separated by a deep canyon, the longitudinal fissure. If this were a theme park map, this fissure would be the central boulevard, dividing East Brain from West Brain. But unlike any park you've visited, this boulevard is crossed by a powerful bridge, the Corpus Callosum, a sleek silvery monorail system, carrying information at lightning speeds, faster than any fiber optic cable ever designed. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever forgotten where you placed your keys, only for them to show up in the most obvious spot? Or had a song get stuck in your head for hours? That's the brain's way of reminding you that it's not just a storage warehouse. It's an amusement arcade, full of quirks, pranks, and clever tricks. As you enter deeper into the cortex, you'll find that this city is alive with laughter, music, and whispers of old memories, trying to sneak their way back into consciousness. Some say it's the most sophisticated computer in the universe. I say computers dream of being brains one day. Now let's step onto the moving walkway that leads us into the cerebral cortex, the sprawling outer layer of grey matter that folds and bends like the most intricate origami ever created. From up close, you can see the ridges, the gyri, rising like ridgelines, and the valleys, the sulci, dipping like winding canals between them. Why so many folds? Because evolution had a challenge: how to pack an enormous amount of processing power into a skull that still had to fit through a birth canal. So, the brain crumpled in on itself, like stuffing a giant sheet of paper into a tiny box without tearing it. The more folds, the more surface area. The more surface area, the more neurons. And more neurons mean more possibilities for thought, creativity, and consciousness itself. Take a left now, and you'll enter the frontal lobe district. The frontal land, if you will. This is the park's bustling headquarters, the control tower of personality, decision-making, planning, and problem-solving. It feels a little like a corporate skyscraper, combined with a playground. Serious business conducted on one floor, but just down the hallway, a group of kids is building castles out of sand. Here lies the prefrontal cortex, the executive suite where long-term decisions are drafted. When you choose to watch one more episode, to go for that jog, or to eat that donut, it's this office that stamped the final approval. And just across from that is the motor cortex, the ride operator who pulls levers and presses buttons, sending commands down to the spinal cord. So you can lift your arm, tap your foot, or wave hello. Picture a roller coaster here called the Movement Express. Every time a thought comes through, a car launches down the track, zipping off toward a limb. Let's swing right into the parietal lobe. Here, the park transforms into a giant interactive museum, where sensations come to life. Walls ripple with touch, sound, and spatial awareness. Want to know how you're standing upright without looking at your feet? Thank the parietal lobe, which keeps track of your body in space. It's like walking through a funhouse with mirrors. Except the mirrors are constantly recalibrating so you don't bump into walls or fall over. The sensory cortex lies here, a great hall lined with glowing booths. Step into one, and suddenly you feel texture. Sandpaper, silk, rainwater dripping. Each booth corresponds to a part of your body. Curiously, the map is distorted. The hands and lips get the biggest booths because they're packed with sensors, while the torso and legs shrink down to tiny stalls. If you've seen the homunculus diagram, with its huge hands and giant lips, that's the park mascot for this zone. Ahead lies the occipital lobe, and suddenly the park feels like a cinema. Towering IMAX screens stretch across your vision, bursting with color, motion, and depth. Here, the brain translates raw signals from your eyes into the world you think you see. But beware, it's all an illusion. The occipital lobe stitches together photons and nerve signals, fills in blind spots, and guesses at what might be hidden in shadows. Every visual memory you've ever had is archived in this darkened hall. Imagine rows of film reels spinning, each one a frame of your life, waiting to be replayed. And what if I told you that everything you're seeing right now, even me guiding you through this park, is just an electrical storm inside this theater? The occipital lobe makes it feel so real that you never question the trick. We turn once more and stumble into the temporal lobe, a land of echoes and symphonies. This is the auditory theme zone, where sound waves are transformed into voices, music, and meaning. Wander into one chamber, and you'll hear every song you've ever loved, playing softly in the background. Another chamber whispers old conversations, the voices of loved ones, teachers, friends. Here too, memory is stored like a library with infinite shelves. The hippocampus, coiled like a seahorse, is the librarian, cataloging each day's experiences into long-term storage. Without it, the park would be a place of endless now. No past, no future. Only this moment, slipping constantly away. And just behind the hippocampus, in a chamber lit with red warning lights, lurks the amygdala, the park's haunted house. Step too close, and you feel fear surge through your veins, adrenaline flooding, heart racing. The amygdala is the guardian of survival, the one who makes sure you never forget the face of danger. But it's not just about fear, it's about passion, excitement, the thrill of the roller coaster drop. Without it, life would be flat, emotionless, stripped of meaning. The amygdala makes sure you care. But wait, we've only explored the surface. Beneath these glittering attractions lies the brainstem, the park's underground subway system. It doesn't look like much, just a stalk connecting the brain to the spinal cord. But it is the reason you are alive right now. It keeps your heart beating, your lungs breathing, your eyes blinking. You don't have to buy a ticket for this ride, because it's always running, day and night. Miss it for even a few minutes, and the park shuts down entirely. Imagine the brainstem as the park's emergency generator. Silent, reliable, invisible, but utterly essential. And tucked just behind the brainstem lies one of the park's most underrated gems, the cerebellum. Don't let its wrinkled, cauliflower-like appearance fool you. This is the balance pavilion, the coordination carnival. Walk inside and you'll find tightrope walkers practicing on wires, jugglers tossing flaming pins, dancers spinning in perfect pirouettes. Every fluid motion, every precise adjustment comes from this zone. It's the reason you can sip coffee without spilling it, type on a keyboard, or catch a ball flying toward your head. The cerebellum is the quiet perfectionist of the park, rarely noticed. But without it, everything would feel clumsy and chaotic. Now, as we approach the end of today's tour, let's climb to the highest viewpoint in the park and look down at it all. The hemispheres like domed rooftops, the lobes glowing with activity, the brainstem humming with life, the cerebellum spinning its delicate routines. 3 pounds of tissue, yet everything you've ever loved, every secret you've ever kept, every story you've ever lived is written in the circuits below. And doesn't it make you wonder, if your brain can create a theme park as vivid as this in your imagination, what else is it capable of? What frontiers remain unexplored inside these folds? Hold that thought, because this is just the beginning. In our next tour, we'll dive deeper into the microanatomy, the neurons, synapses, neurotransmitters, the dazzling light show at the cellular level that makes this entire park possible. But before you head to the next ride, take a moment, like this video, subscribe to Anatomy Park, and drop a comment about which brain zone amazed you most today. And trust me, you don't want to miss the next ride, because the neuron roller coaster is about to begin. You step off the grand plaza of the brain air slopes and descend down a spiral staircase lit by flickering currents of electricity. The deeper you go, the more the park changes. The bustling boulevards of the cortex fade behind you, and suddenly you're entering the microscopic zone, a land where the rides are smaller than dust, yet grander than any roller coaster you've ever known. Welcome to the Neuron District, the cellular heart of Brain Park, where the true magic happens. Here, the attractions shrink until they're almost invisible, but don't worry, you're given a special set of magnifying glasses, lenses that zoom down to the scale of micrometers. The moment you put them on, the world bursts into life. You're standing among billions of neurons, each glowing like a tiny lantern, each sprouting branches like ancient trees in a glowing forest. And just like a forest, there are trails everywhere, axons stretching like highways, dendrites branching like roots, each one reaching for connection. The air hums with faint crackles, and then it hits you. This is not just a forest, it's a lightning storm. A neuron sparks, sending a wave of electricity shooting down its axon. You watch it race like a roller coaster car on rails, speeding toward a gap, the synapse. And here comes the thrill. The roller coaster doesn't just jump the track. It explodes into fireworks of neurotransmitters, tiny chemical messengers catapulting across the gap, locking into receptors like keys fitting perfectly into locks. The ride resumes on the next neuron, and then another and another, until the whole forest is alive with pulses of light and sound. Pause here for a thought experiment. If every time you had an idea, a decision, or a memory, it looked like this, flashes of lightning leaping between trees. How many flashes do you think are happening in your brain right now, just from listening to this? The answer will stun you. Billions. Every second. Your brain fires about 100 trillion signals every day. That's more activity than all the text messages sent worldwide. And you, the traveler, are standing right in the middle of it. But neurons are only part of the story. Look closer, and you'll see the overlooked heroes of the park, the glial cells. Most visitors rush past them, but here, they shine in their own pavilion. They don't spark with electricity, but they're the engineers, janitors, and nutritionists of Brain Park. Astrocytes stretch out like glowing starfish, wrapping around blood vessels to feed the neurons with oxygen and glucose. Oligodendrocytes line up like cable installers, wrapping axons with myelin sheaths that look like glowing insulation, speeding up the signals by up to 100 times. And microglia, tiny sentinels, patrol the park like security guards, sweeping away debris, fighting infections, keeping the peace. Without glia, the park would collapse into chaos. And speaking of blood vessels, you can't tour Brain Park without marveling at its plumbing system. Rivers of crimson weave everywhere, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and hormones. If you stretched out all the blood vessels in your brain end to end, they would wrap around the earth nearly 4 times. Stop and picture that. All those vessels coiled and curled, feeding this 3-pound organ, keeping it alive every single second. And if the flow stops for just 5 minutes, the park goes dark. That's how fragile and how powerful this system is. Follow the glowing red rivers, and you'll stumble upon the Circle of Willis, the grand fountain of Brain Park. Picture a water park centerpiece. Except instead of spraying jets of water, it sprays lifelines of blood to every corner of the brain. This circular arterial hub is the safety net. If one route is blocked, others reroute to keep the rides running. It's one of evolution's greatest engineering feats, a failsafe to protect the most precious park on Earth. Now you arrive at a darker tunnel, lined with flashing hazard signs. This is the Clinical Curiosities Corridor, a special exhibit that shows what happens when the rides break down. One chamber flickers with the chaos of epilepsy, a storm where neurons fire uncontrollably, flooding the park with electrical surges. Another shows the slow unraveling of neurons in Alzheimer's disease, memories fading like old photographs left in the sun. Step carefully, for here you glimpse the vulnerabilities of the park. And yet, even in this corridor, you see resilience. Neurons rewiring, circuits rerouting, the park adapting. Neuroplasticity is its miracle, the ability to reshape itself, to heal, to learn, to grow stronger from experience. But we're not done. Step onto the glass elevator that lowers you deeper still, into the brain's most mysterious zones. You arrive at the limbic system, the emotional carnival, hidden beneath the surface rides. You've already peeked at the hippocampus and amygdala, but now you see how vast the carnival really is. Each attraction here plays with your feelings, spinning you between joy, sorrow, rage, and love. Picture a Ferris wheel, where every seat is an emotion, lifting you high with euphoria, dropping you low with despair, spinning you dizzy with passion. Without this carnival, the park would be all logic, no soul. And what fun is a park without thrill rides? Next, you find the hypothalamus, a control booth no bigger than a peanut, yet the mastermind of hunger, thirst, sleep, and hormones. Imagine a mischievous park operator who decides whether you feel hungry enough to eat 3 corn dogs or tired enough to collapse on a bench. It controls your thermostat, keeping your body at just the right temperature, and even whispers commands to the pituitary gland, the park's hormone factory. Here's a curious thought. Every time you felt nervous butterflies in your stomach, or blushed with embarrassment, or shivered with excitement, this tiny booth was pulling the strings. From here, the tour guide invites you into the thalamus, the grand relay station. Picture a central hub where every ride sends its messages. Sight, sound, touch, taste, and the thalamus sorts them like a busy switchboard operator. Nothing reaches the consciousness pavilion without passing through here. It's the central train station of Brain Park, and without it, the rides would be chaotic noise. As you wander, the guide pauses to ask, what would it be like if you could turn off one part of this park? What if you silenced the amygdala? Would you live fearless or reckless? What if the hippocampus went dark? Would you live forever in the present or be lost in confusion? These thought experiments remind you how delicate and astonishing this park truly is. The tour crescendos now with a ride called the Neurons Symphony. You sit in a chamber surrounded by pulsing lights and waves of sound. Each flash represents an action potential, each note a neurotransmitter at work. Dopamine rings like a triumphant trumpet, rewarding you with joy, Serotonin hums like a calming cello, steadying your mood. GABA is the quiet percussion, damping the noise, keeping things balanced. And glutamate blazes like violins at full speed, driving learning and memory. Together, they form the music of thought itself. The audience around you sits spellbound, realizing that their emotions, decisions, and sense of self are nothing more than the harmony of chemicals in constant play. But just as the music fades, the guide leans close and whispers, "You've only seen half the park. Deeper still lie mysteries unsolved, consciousness, dreams, creativity, whole districts unexplored. The ride isn't over, not even close. The lights brighten and you're ushered back to the main boulevard. You're invited to reflect. Everything you've seen, the neurons firing, the glial support, the rivers of blood, the symphony of chemicals, is happening inside your own head right now. The park is alive, always buzzing, always changing, and you are both the guest and the operator." The guide pauses with a smile and says, "If you've been amazed so far, just wait. In the final part of this journey, you'll uncover the deepest secrets of Brain Park, the nature of consciousness, the mysteries of dreams, and the dazzling frontier of the mind." That's the grand finale. But before you rush ahead, take a moment. Subscribe to Anatomy Park so you don't miss the next chapter. Like this video to keep the park's lights shining, and share in the comments which ride fascinated you most today. You return to the gates of Brain Park one last time, and already the air feels different. The rides behind you, the lobes, the neurons, the rivers of blood, are still glowing, still humming. But tonight, there's something new in the air. A hush, a sense of anticipation. Because now, traveler, you're not just here to explore the park's attractions. You're here to uncover its greatest mystery. Not the rides, not the engines, but the light show that turns it all into you. You step through the gates, and the tour guide lowers their voice. You've walked the boulevards of the cortex. You've dived into the micro rides of neurons and glia. But all of that was just the stage. Now let's meet the performer. And with that, the path ahead flickers to life, glowing with colors you've never seen before. Shimmering auroras that pulse and twist, rising into the sky like fireworks. This, you're told, is the Pavilion of Consciousness, the grand finale of Anatomy Park. But before we step fully inside, let's ground ourselves. Everything you've learned so far, the cortex, the limbic carnival, the neuron symphonies, those are mechanisms, wires and circuits, cogs and gears. But what is it that turns those sparks into an experience? How do electrical impulses become love, or grief, or the taste of strawberries? That's the enigma we chase tonight. The path splits into 3 rides, each one promising a piece of the puzzle. The first is the Hall of Evolution, the second, the Theatre of Dreams, and the last, the Mirror Maze of the Self. Follow me. We begin with the Hall of Evolution. The doors creak open, and suddenly you're traveling backward through time. The decorations change as you walk. First, the sleek glass corridors of the human cortex, then the more ancient structures of the mammalian brain, and finally, the primitive stone chambers of the reptilian brain. Guides in period costumes, scaled reptiles, fur-covered mammals, wave as you pass. The message is clear. Your brain is not one invention, but 3 layered atop one another. The brainstem, ancient and unyielding, keeping you alive. The limbic system, the mammal's gift, granting you bonding, memory, and emotion. And finally, the cortex, vast and folded, the birthplace of art, philosophy, science, and imagination. Here's a thought experiment. What if you could peel away these layers? If you lost the cortex, you'd lose thought and language. But the park would still keep you breathing, your heart still beating. Remove the limbic system, and you'd survive, but stripped of passion, bonding, memory. Life would be flat and mechanical, and without the brainstem, of course. The park shuts down completely. This layered architecture explains not just survival, but why we feel torn sometimes. Why logic fights with emotion. Why instinct interrupts reason. The park is not one voice, but a council of three. And every decision you've ever made is the result of their debates. The ride slows, and the guide asks, which voice do you think speaks loudest in your life? The cold whisper of survival, the fiery cry of emotion, or the quiet reasoning of thought? There's no single answer, but the question lingers as you step out of the hall. Now, you're ushered into the theater of dreams. The seats are soft, the lights dim, and suddenly the stage erupts in color. Strange, surreal images flicker before you. Flying elephants, shifting landscapes, impossible stories stitched together from fragments of memory. This is the dreamscape, and it feels oddly familiar because you've lived here every night. The guide explains that dreams are the park's midnight festival. The brainstem's REM generators spark the show. The limbic system floods the stage with emotion, and the cortex stitches scenes together into a movie that makes sense. Well, almost. Why do we dream? Some say it's the brain rehearsing, preparing for danger. Others believe it's memory consolidation, your hippocampus filing the day's events into the library. Still others think it's creativity unleashed, the park experimenting with new connections, weaving patterns that waking logic would reject. Whatever the purpose, dreams prove something profound. The brain doesn't rest. Even asleep, the park is alive, still telling stories, still inventing. And then comes the twist. The guide leans close and whispers, what if your waking life is just another dream? After all, both are electrical storms in the cortex. Both feel real while you're in them. How can you be certain which one you're walking through right now? The theater goes dark, leaving the question echoing in your mind. Shaken but curious, you move on to the final attraction, the mirror maze of the self. At first it seems simple. Hallways lined with mirrors, reflections of yourself stretching endlessly. But as you walk, the reflections change. One shows you as a child, another as an elder, another as a stranger you don't recognize. Some mirrors warp you into shadows, others into bursts of light, and then the guide's voice fills the hall. This is the question neuroscience has yet to answer. How does the park create not just thought, not just dreams, but you? The sense of being a self, of having continuity, of remembering yesterday and anticipating tomorrow. The maze grows stranger. You see mirrors labeled with disorders, depersonalization, where people feel like actors watching their own lives, schizophrenia, where voices echo from unseen mirrors, Alzheimer's, where reflections fade until the self itself dissolves. These clinical curiosities remind you of the fragility of identity, that the self you take for granted is not one thing, but a delicate construction of circuits, memories, and perception. And then you step into the final chamber, where there are no mirrors at all, only light. Here, you realize the truth. The park doesn't show you the self. You are the park. Every ride, every reflection, every spark of a neuron is part of you. You're not a visitor here. You're the architect, the performer, the audience. And perhaps the greatest trick of all is that you'll never see the whole show. Only the part the park chooses to reveal. The finale begins. Fireworks burst across the domed sky of Brain Park. Each explosion a metaphor for consciousness itself. Brief, dazzling, and mysterious. The guide turns to you one last time. We've walked the lobes. We've surfed the neurons. We've tasted the blood rivers and heard the symphony of neurotransmitters. We've wandered through dreams and mirrors. And still, the biggest mystery remains unsolved. What is consciousness? What is the self? Maybe the park itself doesn't know. Maybe the ride is the answer. The lights dim. The tour ends. But before you leave, the guide gestures toward the horizon, where new gates glow in the distance. The Heart Pavilion, the Lungs Lagoon, the Digestive Rapids. Other wonders of Anatomy Park waiting for you. Subscribe to keep your ticket active, the guide says, and comment below. Which part of the brain ride amazed you most? And tell me this, what would you like to explore next? The gates close behind you, but the park never sleeps. Because even now, as you sit listening, your own brain is the one running the show.